All right.
So hi everyone, my name is Aradia Ramirez and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a student development coordinator in our student leadership office. And today we're going to be talking about how to find the right club for you at Duke. And I'll let Anna go ahead and introduce herself and we'll get started.
Thanks so much. My name is Anna Lennon. I'm an associate director for student engagement for leadership in our office. And we're excited to talk about this a little bit with you today because we think it's really important, and we also know that the activities fair can be a lot of information to try and navigate through for students, so we want to give folks some guidelines and steps to maybe help them do that. So the first thing we just want to share is some goals and expectations for the session, so you know what you're going to get out of it, and also know what we hope you can do. So by the end of this session, we really want to make sure you know 2 qualities that you are looking for in a student club and some tools you can use to find those. We also hope that you can be as engaged as much as you feel comfortable, and know that participation is welcome, and it really helps you. As we said, with a smaller group, we can have a really great tailored conversation and ask really specific questions, so please take advantage of that. And as always, ask questions if you want to know more. We are pretty flexible presenters, and so we want to make sure that you are getting things out of this. You're welcome to ask questions with the audio or the chat. I'm managing the PowerPoint, so I'm going to trust Auralia to see the chat since I can't see it as well with the PowerPoint. A few things we're going to cover today. Obviously, we introduced ourselves. We're going to talk a little bit about your long-term vision for yourself and your time at Duke, and also connecting to student groups and what that looks like. And then finally, time commitments and a good way to help think about those as you prepare to join some groups.
So it's important to also touch on what is the importance of student groups. And so what we've seen with students in general, that it's a large part of your college experience, not just socially, but also professionally. So there's so many student organizations at Duke that can help enhance your experience in the classroom and help you get that hands-on experience with your organization. And that may be through doing activities within the community, in the Durham community, or on campus. And so through your involvement in student organizations, you get the opportunity to meet so many different people and to build upon skills that you may be learning in the classroom, but also to get that in addition, like those hands-on skills outside the classroom. Yeah.
So to start with, think a little bit about who you want to be at the end of your time at Duke. Imagining who you want to be as yourself, but also the people that you're around, the groups that you are a part of, whether that's a structured group or your friend groups, and also the impact you want to leave by the time you're done. So we're going to ask some more specific questions about that, but really thinking about that vision that when you walk across the stage and get handed a diploma, how do you want to be different than you are now?
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of more of the conversation piece. So if you feel comfortable speaking or in the chat, like we mentioned before, we can do either of those. So in 4 years, if you're a first year student, or even if you're not, think about when you're graduating, what do you want people to say about you by the time you're done with your time at Duke? How would you want people to describe you?
I don't know exactly how I'd want them to describe me, but I at least hope that, when I graduate, when I'm handed that diploma, that I'll have a group of people that will remember me for many, many years in the future. I really value, I guess, long-term connections. I hope professors, don't forget me, my friends, we keep in contact. I guess there we go. Maybe I hope people would remember me as someone who was very loyal and dedicated.
Yeah, and that is huge. And what you're talking about also touches on building those authentic relationships with not just your peers and staff, but also your faculty members and community members. So that's important. What else? I know one thing, that an example that I share is I wanted people to know that I'm dedicated and driven with the things that I'm involved in. And so those are some things that helped me decide when looking at clubs and organizations when I was an undergrad, which clubs and organizations like provided that motivation and provide that support for that as well. And we'll talk more about that later and how it connects back to student organizations.
Awesome. So thinking a little more broadly than yourself, by the time you're done at Duke, what kind of people do you want to be around? Thinking about the descriptors of the people that you are with, not just those of yourself, but also what do you want your relationships with those people to look like? And that can be professional, that can be close-knit, that can be all kinds of descriptors, but it's really up to you to sort of define how you want those relationships to look. So what are some thoughts or responses to those questions for folks? And it's probably also important to say there's no wrong answer to what these things look like for people. What you say might be really different than what someone else would say than the next person you asked, right? So if we have 6,000 students, we're going to get 6,000 different answers. And so there really is no wrong answer. It's about what you want that to look like in your goals.
Yeah, I felt like I missed last year was maybe like motivation. I think I would, I was part of a cross country team in high school, and I really enjoy like being around people, mutually push each other. It makes, the hard work much easier when everyone else around you is, trying their best.
Absolutely.
And in the chat, we have someone who talked about being around people they can trust, which is also really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like that's a good thing to have no matter what else you have. It feels much nicer to trust someone.
Yes, of course.
Awesome.
So now to take it a little bit step further, we know that a lot of students that we work with talk about the legacy that they want to leave at Duke. And so what legacy do you want to leave, and in what ways do you want to leave things better than you found them? So what comes to mind when you think about that part, what legacy you want to leave?
Personally, I feel that I enjoy more like concrete things. I don't really know exactly what that means, but maybe it's a senior thesis or something like that I create. I'd be much happier like leaving behind like almost like a physical object even. It would just bring me great joy to come back and be like, I did that. Because I feel like I don't know, I don't enjoy like, I guess, intangible legacies as much because it seems so much more fragile and like it can go away. I mean, I would at the same time want to leave a legacy, behind in the people that I met. Like, I like long-term stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. Like some of the things you all mentioned before touch on this, like the relationships you built. That could be a part of the legacy that you leave, and also the tangible things you're talking about, like the new contributed knowledge that you're leaving at the university through your thesis or whatever it may be. So those can all be a part of that.
Like, yeah, I guess it'd be really fun if I like, was part of some like I don't know what successful would mean specifically, but generally like a research project that, let's say, like finished their goal or we created something together. That would be nice.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, in your presentation, it keeps saying in 4 years, in 4 years. So this Zoom conference is for only undergrad students, or does it include grad students? Because I'm a first year's grad student.
Yeah, so I mean, originally when we were developing it in 4 years, we were thinking first year undergrad students, but this information can also be applicable for grad students as well, 100%. And so we just, in our minds, that's what we put there, but it's definitely applicable to grad students as well. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And so after graduate, right? So can we stay in touch? For example, however, you are not present based in Duke, but within the network of school clubs or Duke University. So can we work on some certain projects in order to keep and maintain close connections?
Hmm. Some of our groups do have more alumni connections than others. It depends upon the student group. And we'll get to that a little bit. So that's a great question for you to ask when you're trying to talk to groups about joining, is like, what does this look like with alumni afterwards? Because some of them might have that. And then that may be an important thing to you, that you can still retain that connection. Some groups are really more only driven by the people that are here. And when people graduate, they leave, and that's the end of it. Duke Alumni Association also has a great network that I do not have a ton of knowledge about, but that is a whole online network, sort of like their own internal Facebook for just Duke alumni. And it's a great way to stay connected that way too. And it's broken up into all kinds of things. There's some student clubs that have their own networks within it. There's some identity-based groups. There's things based on academic area. So it's another great tool. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but we can look up when we're done and make sure we find out, so you know about that too. Because you can join it now, even when you're still a current student, and see all of that, and still build connections with even current alumni while you're a current student. It's a really cool tool. Where'd my mouse go? The really fun thing about PowerPoint and Zoom, your mouse disappears all the time on you. It's very helpful. So one of the ways that you can find information about groups, and there's a couple different things, but is through the Duke Groups page. And so I screenshotted a little bit right here, but if you just do a search online for Duke Groups or go to dukegroups.com, all one word, it'll bring you to this page, and you log in with your regular NetID login. And there is an activities fair event that you can search for and attend. And that's going on Thursday and Friday of this week. So that you can, meet people, visit virtual tables, leave messages, maybe find people live there to chat, to have that conversation back and forth about their group and ask what they do and what's going on. But you can also search by category within that. And so we're going to show you some examples of that. That you can look for different topics within the pages to find what's of interest to you. And so that's really helpful as well. And then there's contact info listed on there for those groups to reach out and find out a little more about them.
Yeah, so here are the categories that you can search through Duke Groups. And so you can see there's academic, student organizations, common interests, political service and social action, and so forth. We included a couple examples of student organizations that fall under these categories, just to give you an idea as we move through this presentation and as you think about the activities fair coming up, like Anna mentioned. And so as you can see, even on this slide alone, there are a lot of student organizations, and there will be even more groups. I believe undergraduate, there's about 300 organizations.
I think so.
And then there's definitely, I think, maybe 300 graduate professional. Don't quote me on it, but there are a lot. And so, look through there, see if there are any that, call your attention. And the Student Activities Fair is a great place to think about who you want to be when you're, done with Duke in about, wherever you're at, if you're a first year student in 4 years, and asking questions of these organizations to see if they fit your needs and what your goals are personally and professionally.
So this is the part that we think is probably the most useful for folks, and where we wanted to use some of that feedback you gave us to help frame those questions. But it's also a time when we're really here to workshop some of those things with you. So these are very broad questions that anyone could ask of a club that we would absolutely recommend, right? But knowing what your goals are, you can take and make these even more specific. So asking a group or, if the club president is sitting there at the activities fair and you ask, what skills have you developed as a member of the club? They might be able to tell you some things, but if you know that demonstrations of loyalty are really important to you, asking, how has your group helped you build your loyalty to each other, right? That's so much more specific. And then you can evaluate if that answer is actually good or not, right? They could say that it has helped them build that skill, but when they're able to tell you or not give you a good answer for how it's helped build that skill, you get a lot more insight. So we hope that these questions can then be made more specific for you. Also talking about, let's see, what were some other ones? Motivation and trust, and people that sort of help push each other and mutually grow. When you're talking about that second set of questions, number 2 on there, asking, how do you build not just relationships within this club, but trusting relationships? And how do you describe what trust looks like in this group? That's a really great question, because the content of a group is not just what they tangibly do, it's also how they interact with each other. And there are many groups that do really similar things with very different vibes and very different cultures that they've developed within their groups. And so even then, it's about finding the one that's going to be the right feel for you, because when you feel that connection, it helps you be more successful within the club and within the rest of your experience. And then I think even when you talk about that concrete impact, right, asking, what tangible ways does your club help the Duke community, or what tangible things does your group leave behind? What projects have you completed? What have you contributed? In those, looking for those more hard and fast things. Because some of our groups leave much more intangible and culture change impressions, and that's what some students want to leave. And some of them definitely do actual projects where they're developing things and working on solutions to problems in the world and at Duke. So those are some ways to help tease out some of those specifics. But as we've talked through that a little bit and you've thought about your vision, are there other qualities that you might be looking for in a club that we could help you talk through how to make those questions realistic right now and how to shape these? Because this is sort of where we can help you workshop that a little bit. So what else are folks looking for that we haven't talked about? Whoop, I went back one. Sorry. That we haven't talked about that we could help you consider in a question, and you can put it in the chat or share out.
No, I've also been wondering, again, I don't know, this is kind of very general, but like hoping at some point get involved, maybe some sort of service group or whatever, but I feel like there's a ton of them and it's hard to wrap my head around all the different groups.
Yeah. Arale, do you want to talk about that a little more?
Yeah, so I used to advise Duke Partnership for Service, which there are 65 plus specifically service organizations under that umbrella. So Duke Partnership for Service helps to support those service organizations, and Durham and Community Affairs. That department also is a good resource if you're looking for ways to engage in service, especially during COVID. That may look differently. So I know that Durham and Community Affairs is looking at ways that our students can still contribute to our community in a safe way. And so there are definitely tons of organizations that do service. And so I would recommend looking at Duke groups, but also if you are interested in reaching out to somebody from Durham and Community Affairs, I can give you at the end of the presentation, I can give you the contact information for them. They're wonderful. Her name's Lindsay, wonderful person to connect with. And she knows so much about the Durham community and ways to get involved, especially during COVID. So there are definitely ways to do it. And I understand it's very overwhelming because there's so many opportunities, and it's just kind of talking to the right people and then feeling what's best for you for your schedule, which we'll talk about in a second, of what fits in with your time schedule. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, what was the contact the woman you mentioned again?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat here.
Thanks.
And I think too, right, you talked about tangible things. So even just looking up at the service groups and looking at what services that they do. So for you, volunteering with an after-school reading program might not feel tangible. I mean, it might. I'm just sort of making a generalization about that. But something that builds or repaints spaces in Durham might feel much more tangible. So trying to sort of even just read broadly what they do, and then from there sort of chunk out the groups that feel like they fit what you like about service. And then thinking about the things that you are going to feel connected to, right? Like there are certain things in service that I would feel super connected to. I love to run, but if volunteering for Girls on the Run, we used to do that where I lived in Virginia. I did that and it was great. And I loved seeing these like 8-year-olds who were like gangly and going like this, figure out how to run a 5K over a couple weeks, right? But volunteering to build a playground would not feel really fulfilling for me. Partially because I don't really like building things. It doesn't fit in my wheelhouse. But you know, that knowing where my strengths lie and what I connect with helps me sort of narrow that down. So that's just something I would also say is useful to think about as you sort of consider which groups to look at. Other things folks have thought about that we haven't talked about that we might be able to help you sort of transition into some of those questions or digging through things? Cool. We can always come back to it if you think of more as we go through this, but right, there we go.
So one of the other most important, one of the top important questions to ask when looking at student groups, especially if you're attending the activities fair, is what does the time commitment look like to be a part of the organization? And you can look at this you can ask them specifically, like if you're just a member of the organization versus an active like board member, if you're president, VP, treasurer, etc. And so being specific about those differences. And so what Anna and I did here is compile a sample time frame of like what a week could look like for a student. And we know like these hours may vary depending on you and like what your day-to-day looks like for you personally. So for class, on average, you attend class 12 hours a week. And then homework, what we did was we multiplied each hour you're in class by, was it 2 or 3?
3, yeah.
Which is like the recommended like average of like how long you spend doing homework outside of class. And then sleep, 56 hours if you're getting a total of 7, I believe it was 7 that we did there a week. And then we calculated how long it may take to eat for the week and so forth. And so we calculated all of these and then subtracted it by 168 hours, which is how many hours we have in a week. And with this, you have about 22 hours remaining. And so if you think about what else you may be doing outside of what is listed, how much time can you dedicate to an organization, and how many organizations can you commit to in a semester while still prioritizing the important things like sleeping and eating and, you know, your personal wellness. And so this is a sample, and what we recommend is to take some time, you know, during, probably before the activities fair, to write out like what does your day-to-day look like, so you have at least an idea of how many hours you spend focusing on this. And then once you ask the organizations of the time commitment, you can kind of see where that can fit in your schedule. And we know that can change, you know, month to month depending on what is happening in your personal life, but it's important to have an idea of what your time looks like, your budgeted time looks like. Are there any questions about this? No? Anything you would add, Anna?
No, I don't think so. It's really about helping understand what you need in a schedule to be successful. in terms of like, we estimated roughly 2 hours a day for eating, because you don't spend a full hour eating every day, and your breakfast might be 15 minutes while you're on your way somewhere that you're like eating your oatmeal from a cup. But lunch and dinner may take more time, you know, like we really roughly estimated this. But it's definitely recommended to think critically about what you actually will do. And social time might include scrolling Facebook if that's what you do, right? Or Instagram or TikTok, or wherever you find yourself engaging. And just be honest about what that time is, so that you're not ending up with, you know, 200 hours per week worth of work when there's only 128 hours in a week.
Yeah, perfect. And then we just added that question. So how many hours do you spend on the club each week? These are a good questions to ask members. And then just like as a general member versus an executive board member.
Yeah. So that's really the basics of our presentation. We'll stick around a little bit for some questions, but I sort of want to wrap it up so we can finish the recording part. If you have really activities fair specific questions and want to know what that looks like, Keith Norris, our colleague and our student involvement side of the team, can really be helpful with that. But if you want to talk about your leadership goals, here's all of our contact information as well. You're welcome to shoot us an email and follow up with us if you think of another question later, or you said, what was that thing that we talked about? I'm not remembering. We are happy to help and sort of help you figure out how to get the most out of things. So I'm going to turn off the recording.